Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta Ndlela. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast you should be tuning into. Communication and soft skills are crucial for your career growth and leadership development. And by the end of this episode, please log on to Apple and Spotify and leave us a rating and a review. Now let's get communicating with Phyllis Leavitt. Did I say that right?
You
Leavitt.
did. You said it right.
Thank you. She is a psychotherapist and an author who has been treating children, individuals, and families for over 34 years. Phyllis is here to help us to deal with different family dynamics, conflict resolution, and so much more when it comes to relationships with ourselves and with others. And before I go any further, please welcome her to the show. Hi, Phyllis.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here with you.
My absolute pleasure. Welcome. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, my name is Phyllis Leavitt, and as you said, I've been a psychotherapist for well over 30 years, and I've worked with all kinds of people. And I just recently wrote a book called America in Therapy. And one of the big reasons why I wrote the book is because what we learn about communication in the best psychology, nonviolent communication, nonviolent conflict resolution, really looking for how we can all take responsibility for ourselves to make communication work and be profitable. And I don't mean money wise, I mean effective. Um, these are skills that the best psychology teaches us, and they heal relationships, and they prevent violence. And so I wanted to apply what I learned from the best psychology to our country, to the workings of a country and larger institutions, because I think we're suffering today from such a lack of healthy communication skills when there's conflict, when there's difference of opinion, when we think other people are wrong and we're right. And some of the basic skills that we learn in psychology are some of the best tools we can use to help heal some of those great divides that we're really suffering from today. So we can talk on the individual level, we can talk on the collective level, whatever your preference is, I'm happy to go there. But I think the same skills that apply to the individual level really can apply to the collective.
Absolutely. And we will definitely have a deep dive into that. But first, what got you interested in psychology? Out of everything you could have had a career on, why did you decide that psychology was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, like so many people, I think I gravitated toward a profession that had personal meaning for me. When I was in my 30s, I had three little children and in a very dysfunctional marriage, and I ended up in therapy myself. And it really saved my life. I really began to understand my own behavior, some of the ill effects of my early childhood conditioning, things that had hurt me when I was young that were really affecting the ways that I was um, coping with life in general, which were not helping me. And so, really understanding my early conditioning and the things that had hurt me that I was still repeating in some way in my life really changed my life. And I was at that, my youngest was 2, I think, or maybe even younger at that time. And I really wanted to go back to school. And so I decided to go to school in psychology and became a psychotherapist out of my own wonderful experience of healing through lots of therapy. Lots.
Mm. And we really do give a shout out to therapists for the work that they do in helping us heal. But here's the thing as well. When you talk about your marriage, you didn't say, oh, it's his fault. I'm the victim. You said, I wanted to heal. How did you come to have that perspective?
Well, let me tell you, I did say it was his fault. I mean, I did say that. I think that's where we start, right?
Right.
Because we don't know what we're generating from ourselves. We don't, and that's one of the things that psychology really opened up for me was because I had some trauma early on in childhood, because I grew up with, I'll just say this, my mom is passed away a long time ago, but a very narcissistic mother who had her own wounds and didn't know how to really nurture her children. I was attracted to someone like my mom, someone who was very wrapped up in themselves and didn't know how to be nurturing and loving. And I brought that to the situation, not as a blame, but as an unconscious way that we tend to repeat what we know. We tend to try to get love and acceptance and belonging and nurturing and, valuing from the kinds of people that we didn't get it from early on. Or if we did get it, then we're probably attracted to people like that in our adult life. But most of us in an unhealed state tend to repeat the wounds that we've already endured. And so it's not really a question of blaming him or blaming me. We were both unconscious. We both were like moth to flame, and that's how I described that marriage. I was the moth flying into a very familiar flame. And psychotherapy, had I had more healing at the time, maybe that marriage would have survived. I kind of doubt it, but it enabled me to leave something that was really toxic for me and heal. And I had to get out of that to heal.
Mm-hmm. So now let's talk about the work you do. When you help people heal, first of all, when do people know what's wrong, or they come to you and ask, this is what's happening, what do you think is wrong with me, so that we can solve it?
It's a great question. I think people either think something's terribly wrong with them, which I also did. I mean, I wasn't just blaming. I felt like I was a flawed individual my entire life. Um, so I think people come because something's really not working in their life, their relationship with their children, their inability to express their creativity, their difficulty finding meaningful work or making a living or getting along with their coworkers or their, whatever, or their family. People usually come to therapy because something isn't working. And I think we tend to blame other people more than we blame ourselves in general. I think we live in a culture that is very much promotes the idea of blaming other people rather than looking at ourselves, but looking at ourselves without blame, looking at ourselves with deep understanding of where was I coming from? Why did I make that choice? Why am I behaving just like my mother when I couldn't stand the way my mother behaved? Why are we doing the things that we're doing, but with compassion? And a desire to heal the source of the pain that generates our most dysfunctional behaviors. So when people come to therapy, it's usually because of the pain of something not working. And I think good therapy steers us to the formative experiences that we've had ourselves rather than focusing on blaming anybody else. The formative experiences that we've had ourselves that have set us up to not function the way we would like to in the world or in the world of relationship, the way we would most like to have that happen. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. Because, as you said, when we keep repeating those patterns, which is frustrating to us, because
Right.
we live on autopilot and you can think, why do I drive myself crazy? Why do I drive myself crazy? Why do I keep doing this every single time? Why do I keep attracting the same guy? Or why do I keep doing this?
Exactly.
It drives
Exactly.
us crazy too, but we do it again the next day.
Right. Because it's embedded in our unconscious. And one of the great gifts of the best psychological work is to help us make the unconscious conscious and rework some of the beliefs that we took on about ourselves. One of the great gifts of psychotherapy, whether we're talking about a person or a country, really is
Mhm.
because of our experiences, we've taken on certain beliefs about ourselves. And to the extent that those beliefs are negative, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not powerful, I don't matter, I don't belong. To the extent that those beliefs are negative, we develop coping mechanisms out of those negative beliefs that are usually not functional. I become a people pleaser. I become a workaholic. I become an addict. I become a rager. I become an isolated person who can't make relationship. And all of those ways that we cope actually are designed in our psyche to protect us, but they don't. And that's the myth. I've had so many clients, for instance, and I've had, all kinds of symptomatic, people because we bring our symptoms to therapy, but either a rager or somebody who is very isolated and alone, they really feel on an unconscious level that coping mechanism is somehow going to protect them. If I'm Anger can feel like a very protective mechanism, but it doesn't create relationship.
Mhm.
Isolation can feel like I'm going to retreat over here and nobody can hurt me.
Yeah,
But
build
over
up
here
that
alone,
wall nobody can go through.
that's right. But over here alone is a horrible, lonely place to be. So I think that's one of the things that psychotherapy really helps people understand and work through. There's no blame in
Mm-mm.
psychotherapy. In the best psychotherapy, there's no blame. If you became a rager, you may be hurting yourself and the people around you, and that's a cause for concern and a cause for hopefully the motivation to change and heal and grow. But you came by that coping mechanism honestly. It was the best you could come up with from the hurt that you received that didn't get helped. Um,
Why is it that when we say those things, I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, I'm not this, and I'm not that, we say that privately, but sometimes we do verbalize it to those closest to us. So if I say to you, Phyllis, I'm not enough, I'm not this, why is it that if you challenge me and say, Roberta, that's not true, you know that's not true?
mhm.
Why is that not a good enough reason for me to have that shift and say, hey, wait a minute, Phyllis is right. I actually am lovable. Why does
Right.
it
If it
never
was that
happen like
easy,
that?
if it was that easy, there wouldn't be any healing modalities around, right?
Right?
And
Why
but
does that, why is it so deeply embedded that no matter how much those closest to you, those that you know love you, say, that is not true about you?
because it's experiential and it's embedded in a place of experienced trauma or dysfunction in our psyches. I can tell you very specifically, and this was from one incident that I will never forget. How deep one incident can go into a child's life. So I have a younger sister. When I was little, I had a younger sister. We were flower girls at my cousin's wedding. We were probably, I don't know, 6 and 4. We were very little. I don't know how old we were. And we had these beautiful little dresses, and we had to stand in a receiving line for the wedding, where people came by and shook the hand of the bride and the groom and everybody. And there was a man that came through the line, and he could not get over how beautiful my sister was. And he just oohed and awed over my sister. And what do you think I experienced? I'm the ugly sister.
Oh, no.
I'm the one nobody sees. I'm not lovable. I'm not pretty. I'm invisible. And of course, there were other things in my childhood that reinforced that belief. That was the tip of an iceberg, but I'll never forget that moment. And I remember how I felt. So those things can have such a tremendous impact on a child. Um, and that's a minor incident. But if it's reinforced by other messages, which in my life it was, then it becomes part of our belief system about ourselves. And when you're little, when you're 6 or you're 4 or you're 2 or you're 8, what you take in just feels like the truth. We don't have, most of us, and you'd be a very unusual and blessed person if you did. Most of us as children don't have any other part of our psyche that can say, wait a minute, that was that man's view. That's not me. That's not the truth, right? We just don't have that facility. And so, unless we're surrounded by people who really affirm our lovability, our worth, that we should have a voice, that we can be heard, that we have appropriate power in the world to affect the world around us within the limits of being in relationship with other people who also have needs and wants and desires, often we don't get it. And if you're someone who was beaten, who was molested, who was seriously harmed as a child, you do take in very negative beliefs about yourself, and then you cope the best you can. But without help, it's really hard to undo that trance of whatever the negative belief is that you took on.
Hmm. And as you said, it's how you felt. They usually say what we always remember. I mean, imagine how long ago it was when you were 4 or 6.
Right.
But how it made us feel is the reason it keeps being reinforced and is the
That's
reason
right.
we never forget it.
That's right.
How the incident made us feel.
Yeah. It's exactly right. And that emotion can be re-triggered easily in our adult life, right?
Right.
But he looks at you sideways and you think, oh, they think I'm ugly or they think I'm stupid or they don't like me or whatever. And whatever the trauma is underneath that experience just gets activated like that. And I think the healing process, and again, none of it's perfect. I can still get triggered, but I know what those triggers are more or less right now. I have some access to reworking that within myself. And that's the beauty of the healing work that's possible, is that even if you get triggered, even if there's an old stimulus that comes your way, um, you've developed more of that capacity within your adult self not to move back into being 6 years old.
Mm-hmm. Because you know how sometimes we say adults are kids in big bodies because we still
Totally.
really, yeah, we still relive some of those experiences. We're still the little girl who was called this or who was bullied by kids at school. We still
Right,
relive that sometimes if we haven't healed it. And
right,
speaking of therapy, I know that it obviously doesn't take 1 or 2 sessions to heal.
right.
However, sometimes you hear of people who say, I've been in therapy for my people pleasing for 7 years. Does it need to be that long a process?
Well, this is what I would say. I think people are really different because I've worked with people that I worked with for 6 months, and I've worked with people that I worked with for 2 years. And I had a client that I worked with for 11 years. That's very unusual, but this person had a history of very violent sexual and physical abuse for her entire childhood. So we can't judge that it took 11 years for her to really, like, sort of really come out of that place. And it was a process. I mean, she was coming out of it through that time. So I think there's really no judgment, but I think what you really want to evaluate, whether you're talking about 6 months or 2 years or 10 years or whatever, is something happening? Am I getting better? Am I coping better with life? Am I gaining more understanding, or am I just repeating the same old story week after week after week and nothing's happening? So I think we just have to really look at that on an individual basis. Um, and certainly there's therapies that are more effective than others, and there are people that are way more deeply traumatized than others.
It certainly is. And obviously, we're not judging that, but sometimes, because I think what happens is if a person needs some form of therapy for an experience they've had, and they hear that and they think, I'm gonna have to work on this for 7 years. Oh, and then they don't do it at all.
Right, right.
Yeah. So it can
Think
take
7 years
significant.
is unusual, but it's not
Mhm.
it's not inappropriate for certain people. Um, and I think, and I think that a lot of people, like what I've noticed is I've worked intensively with people for a period of time,
Mhm.
and then they're kind of done. And then they might come back 2 years later for a tune-up. Something in their life triggered something that really upset them, and they're not handling it well, and they come back for 1 or 2 sessions. So it can look any different way. And I think,
Right.
and I'll tell you, when I when I first went to therapy, I had sexual abuse in my childhood, and it was very traumatic for me, and it deeply impacted my life. And when I went to therapy, I had so much pain. I had so much pain that that a part of me didn't really want to be alive, except I had
Mm.
children who I adored, and I would never have hurt myself. But that was the psychological state that I was in. And one of the first things I said to the first therapist I went was, I don't want you to judge me for how long this is going to take. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I don't want you to give to me the feeling like I'm not doing this fast enough or well enough. So I think we just need a lot of compassion for what people
Mhm.
need. We don't know what's inside other people. You know, most of the people that I've worked with over the years look like they're functioning okay. They have a job, they take their kids to their doctor's appointments, they take them to their soccer games, they walk their dog, and they may be suffering really, really deeply inside. And so I think it's so important to just look at each other with compassion and not judge.
Absolutely. So your book, America in Therapy, you gave us a small synopsis of what it's about. Right, we recently had an election almost a month ago.
Right.
And America, based on what happened afterwards, the aftermath of the election, what therapy do you think that is needed right now by America?
Yeah. Well, I think it really relates to the topic of your podcast because I said I wrote the book before the election. My book is out now. It came out before the election, but it's out now after the election. And I think the message in my book is actually needed more than ever, which is a lot of the divisiveness and violence that we're experiencing in our country and the escalation of that and the kind of I don't know, the weaponizing of that on a psychological level. These are mental health issues. And a lot of what we really need to learn in our own lives and in our country is how to communicate differently. Because the communication that we have now is all about who's right and who's wrong, and how am I going to prove you're wrong, and how am I going to dominate you into some kind of submission or humiliation or othering or judgment or really the whole model, the whole paradigm of right wrong, of win lose, which is really what that paradigm is. I win, you lose, and I'm going to beat you into some kind of submission, and I'm going to make other people not like you and vilify you or criminalize you or whatever, is what hurts us in our own lives. That's exactly what hurts people in their individual lives, is being made wrong and being, having retaliation come toward them, or punishment or excessive blame or intense judgment, and not seeing people for their beautiful essence that's buried underneath whatever their coping mechanisms might be that aren't functional. Healing doesn't come from judging people or hurting them or humiliating them or ostracizing them. Those are the things that caused our symptoms in the first place. And so my message to the country really is, we're doing that to each other as a nation. We're causing people to feel worthless, to feel unlovable, to feel inferior, to feel violated with no recourse. And of course, they're going to become symptomatic. And that's one of the tip of the iceberg of that. I mean, there's a lot of tips to this iceberg, but a lot of injustice, our horrible incarceration system, mass shootings that are on the rise, that were people who feel so alienated, who are in so much pain, who are in so much rage that it comes out in a violent way. And as horrible as those things are, we have to know that inside every single perpetrator is a victim somewhere who's untreated. And
Mm.
if we don't commit as a society to having a whole different form of communication, a whole nonviolent communication, nonviolent conflict resolution skills so that we can bring out the best in people, so that we can help people cooperate and hear each other deeply and want to cooperate with one another, I think we're going to have more of the same. And it's frightening.
I've only been in this country for 4 years, so you can fill me in on this. Was it always this way? And also because of the politics, or was there ever a time, the 80s, the 90s, where America wasn't this divided and families went this much in conflict because of the politics? Or is you've seen the wave change and things start to look different from what they used to be?
Well, in my experience, I can only speak from my experience, but in my experience, it is really different. I've never seen anything like this in
Hmm.
America before. I mean, people were always like, are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican?
Of
Are you a
course. Mm.
libertarian or a Green Party person? But in my lifetime, I don't remember the amount of hatred associated. I don't ever remember the amount of hatred being generated and being proliferated. When I was young, and I didn't listen to it, a lot of news when I was younger, but I don't remember the media ever being the way the media is now. It was just more like, we're going to tell you what's going on. There was a demonstration. This person said that. Um, this this politician stands for this, that politician stands for that. But it was never, in my experience, until very recently, loaded up with threats of violence, extremes of hatred, extremes of discrimination and othering. This is something um, new and sad, because I think there was a movement in the 60s, 70s, and maybe the early 80s for more love to imbue politics, more acceptance, more cooperation. And I'm not saying it was perfect.
Of
Our
course not.
country
Yeah.
has done our
Mm.
country has done some amazing things and perpetrated incredible violence. We have both. Um, but I have never seen it be the way it is now.
Hmm. And speaking of the news, I always tell this joke to my American friends. I say, I come from a tiny third world country in South Africa. When they tell the news, they say, a red truck hit a gray car with four kids and a husband and a wife, and they passed away, unfortunately. That's the story. And they move on to the next one. Here, I always say they use too many adjectives,
Mm,
meaning they put too much of their opinions on the
right,
story, and
right,
the descriptions themselves are overly done to sort of make your imagination or your brain go a certain direction instead of just telling the story.
right. I
So
think it's really
if
true.
they say a red truck with a Confederate flag driven by a guy with a you know what I mean? So my mind is going a certain direction instead of saying this is just a car accident because somebody didn't use their blinkers and
Mhm.
communicate that I'm changing lanes. That's
Mhm.
how a story gets told in South African news. And here,
Mhm.
there's just so much that gets integrated in the story and descriptions and adjectives, and it starts to make people think differently.
I think that's really true. And um, I think part of that is also which stories are being chosen to be told. There's a lot of stories that are not chosen to be told that are of the wonderful, generous, kind, caring, considerate things that people do, and they never hit the news. The projects that people undertake to feed, people that don't have enough food, or help them grow their own gardens, or work to really enhance the education for children who are in marginalized school systems. There are so many good things that are going on in our country all the time that are not put forth as the role models for what we're hearing on a daily basis, which is so it's partly the way the stories are told and what's told.
Mm-hmm. Because also it then feeds, like you said, into if they tell that story, people are going to be bored, go to another channel where there's more exciting stuff. And by exciting means it incites all the stuff we've talked about. But also, are we then responsible for participating in that type of narrative instead of switching it off and look for more uplifting stories.
Well, thank you for saying that because that really is, in my book, I call us the family of America. We are a family. Have disparate sections and populations, and we're a melting pot of many, many different people with different traditions and different backgrounds and different religions and different genders and different whatevers. But if we look at any large grouping of people as a family, we know that in an individual family, for instance, we do hold the family responsible for what they teach their children and the environment they create for their children and what they put out into the world. And we want parents to teach their children to be cooperative and to be kind and, to not go out and rape and kill and steal, for instance, right?
Right.
And we have a society in which actually we're holding parents more and more responsible. I don't think that's the end game. I think if we have parents in an individual home who are touting guns and spewing hatred, we have to help those families heal. We can't just punish people because they learned what they learned somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
so then if you take that model and you look at the whole country, if we have leaders that are spewing hatred and proliferating gun violence and war, we have to look at ourselves of how do we heal this family? And that's why I wrote the book. Um, we have to heal the family of America the way we need to heal the individual family that's highly dysfunctional or abusive. And there are principles of how to do that. Not that I have all the answers, I don't, but I have 34 years of experience working with extreme dysfunction in my own life and with so many people that I've worked with. And one of the bottom lines of that, this is the short version, and I have lots of details in my book, is that we have to look at what conditioned us to believe and behave the way we do. Just like the individual person who comes to therapy looks, what happened to you? What happened to me that I made the choices in my life that I ended up at the age of 35 deeply depressed? What happened to me? I wasn't born that way. Nobody's born
Mm-hmm.
that way. Something happens to us. So, what's in the history of our country, as well as us as individuals, that has brought us to exactly this place in the history of America where we're more divided than ever, we're more violent than ever, we're more hateful than ever, and we're condoning it? What has brought us to that place? And can
Right.
we look at that with a spirit of healing and compassion and bringing skills? And I just want to go back to the subject of your podcast because one of the things, I have a whole chapter on this in my book, um, among other things, but it's really like, how do you constructively deal with conflict? And again, I don't have all the answers, but I do outline some things in my book that I think are really critical. And the bottom line for dealing with conflict and healing from conflict effectively is that I focus on myself, not on you. What can I be responsible for? How can I communicate with you in a way that you're more likely to hear me? Which means if I'm blaming and shaming and attacking and threatening you, you're probably not going to hear me,
Of course
right?
not.
I don't hear people that behave that way toward me, right? So what can I be responsible for? Can I own my own part if I have a part? Can I be responsible for the tone of voice that I use, that I'm making eye contact with you, that I don't go like this when you're talking or walk out and slam the door? Can I listen with some kind of an open mind while I still advocate for what I believe in? And the bottom line, so there's two bottom lines, I think, to the most effective communication.
Right.
I'll just say that I put 6 principles in this chapter. Restraining my most dysfunctional behaviors, yelling, rolling my eyes, slamming the door, walking out, threatening you, calling you names, restraining myself from anything that's aggressive like that and hurtful. reflecting on myself. Where am I coming from? What is my agenda here? Am I open-minded, or am I acting out of some old wound on automatic pilot? Can I be responsible for the way I'm communicating with you? Can I make amends if I'm sorry? If I really am responsible for part of what's going on, can I make amends to you in a sincere and genuine way? Can I seek some kind of compromise or reconciliation with you? And do I desire to reconnect with you? Because that's the ultimate goal of the best communication. And it doesn't always happen. Sometimes we have to leave each other in peace. But if we can reconnect in some sense of deep understanding and love, that's the best of all possible worlds. So those are some of the skills that I really talk about and really try my best in my most imperfect way to implement in my own life. Um, and the other principle is the motivation to actually heal relationship. Do I want it bad enough, or am I just willing to walk away and think you're a jerk and I'm right and you're wrong?
The
And,
whole blocking, like you said earlier, yes, sometimes there are times to just say, you know what, let Phyllis go in love, but
right,
don't have to be in the same thing. But we have become, because we don't have conflict resolution skills anymore, we've become so accustomed, block, 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 block. I don't want anybody, block, block. You're dead to me, block.
right,
And it has become such a norm. Yes, some cases may warrant that, but it is becoming more and more of a norm because we just don't want to deal with it anymore. And
right.
as you mentioned mental health earlier, sometimes we feel that we're protecting our mental health by not dealing with people, just block everybody.
Hmm. Well, I think there's a difference between deciding this is a situation I don't want to engage with and really walking away from it with some kind of equanimity or peace, or just, your integrity is intact and you haven't harmed anybody.
Right.
And walking away in a way that's retaliatory, or I'm going to ice you out as punishment for what I think you did wrong, that's very different. That's very, very different. And really, the bottom line is, am I doing harm? Do I want to do harm? Do I want to get back at you because you hurt me? I might want to, but is that functional?
And does it do you
Can I
good?
be bigger than that? Can I be bigger than that? Can I not lash out even though I'm so angry and I'm so hurt? Can I not lash out because that doesn't serve?
But it's good to express, like you say, learn the communication skills. It's good to express and be emotionally intelligent about it and express to Phyllis that you hurt my feelings and this is why I'm offended. But we don't have those skills anymore. We either block or lash out.
Right,
We just go extreme. Whatever it is, we go extreme nowadays,
right,
unfortunately.
right. And we're human, I'm going to be hurt sometimes. I'm going to be
Mm.
angry sometimes, and so is the next person. Can we can we tolerate that and still want to heal the relationship? Because that's part of it. One of the things that I experience in the marriage that I'm in now is we trigger each other, we get upset with each other, we have issues, but there is this container of love around our relationship. We know we're going to come back to connection. We know we both want that. We know, and I say this in our most imperfect ways, because I don't know that anybody does this perfectly, but we know in our imperfect ways that we do want to be responsible for ourselves and we do want to come back to love. And that's probably the most important thing of all, even if you don't even have any skills,
Right.
if you
It's
have
like when
no
you deal
skills
with
at
your
all, right?
siblings. You love your siblings to
Right,
death, but sometimes you bicker. Yeah, but you always come back to the fact that you love each other.
right,
Yes.
right.
Do you think that the spike in this mental health crisis is fed by what's currently going on?
I think,
And
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
and is, like I said, is the solution for people to just protect themselves and retreat?
Well, I think, I think it's a multifaceted answer, and I probably don't have all the answers, nor could I even express them if I had them all. But even the ones that the things that I think of, let me just say a couple of key things. I think that, and again, this is one of the reasons why I wrote about the family of America, because the family of America is made up of individuals. And one of the things that I see from having been a therapist, working on a very one-on-one, one individual, one family, one couple, one child level for so many years, is that I think families in America, in general, not every family, but in general, are really hurting. Many families are not supported to make a good living or have adequate care for their children or have good job opportunities or access to mental health resources when they need them. Or so I see in a kind of way that I think maybe the average person isn't really aware of, the level of abuse and neglect on a continuum from mild to extremely severe in families in America today is actually higher than I think most people either know or want to know. So I think we have many suffering people, many suffering children, who don't have access to help or the kind of nurturance they need, and they grow up with their dysfunction and their less than stellar coping mechanisms out there. They're
They repeat
becoming,
those cycles as well.
yeah. And so our families desperately need help for resources, for mental health, for feeling like they belong. Every family needs to feel like they belong here, because that's part of the trauma to many people, is that even if their family is relatively healthy, the messages they're getting from society about the color of their skin or their gender preference or their religion or whatever are still that they're inferior and not wanted. This is a very traumatic condition for many, many people in our country today, and I think it's escalating. Not that it was ever great. I think we've been struggling with this issue for a really long time or forever. But then if you have those kinds of values and policies being implemented and perpetuated from the largest family systems, you have this perfect storm of individual dysfunction and mega family dysfunction colliding. And I
Mhm.
think that's part of what we're seeing today. And that's why our understanding of how to heal family systems on all levels is just critical to our survival. I think it's critical to our survival.
It is. It certainly is, because that's who society is. It's us. Any last words of wisdom? Anything I haven't asked you were hoping to share with our listeners today?
Oh, thank you. I love the topic of your podcast because I think if we could actually focus on our communication and make it healthy and make it safe and make it respectful, I always say it this way. If, we all want to be heard, right? We all want to be heard. We all want to be spoken to with respect, with some level of care, in some way that feels safe and affirming. And yet we don't give that to each other. We just want it for ourselves, but we don't look at the other person wants the same thing. So the
Mhm.
way I say it is, we need to learn in our communication, in addition to all the skills or along with all the skills that you're talking about, I'm talking about. Am I talking to you the way I want you to talk to me? Am I listening to you the way I want to be heard? If we could do just that in Congress, in our homes, we'd have a different world.
Communication. Words of wisdom from Phyllis Leavitt, the psychotherapist and author of America in Therapy, which has recently been released. We need so much healing, not just in America, but globally. So thank you so much, Phyllis, for sharing all your wisdom and expertise today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you and the work you're doing.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for your kind words. Before you go, is there any way we can find you online if any of our listeners want to reach out to you?
Yes, please. My website is my name, Phyllis Leavitt, and you can probably read it on there, but it's PhyllisLeavitt, phyllisleavitt.com. You can read all about my book on there. You can find my book from all the major booksellers. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and I have lots of videos on YouTube, and you're welcome to reach out to me through my website if you would like to have further conversation or more information. If you do reach out to me on my website, you'll receive a free copy of what we were talking about, those 6 steps, those 6 elements of repairing relationship when there's conflict. And I made a PDF that is like a mini course that you can apply in your own life. So you'll get a free copy of that.
Thank you for the free gift. We always love those. We appreciate your generosity. Phyllis Leavitt, psychotherapist and author, thank you very much for being on our show
Thank you.
today.
Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify, and stay tuned for more episodes to come.